In this video I'm going to show you how I made this really cool floating moss ball nano aquascape. We're going to add 4 different colors of Neo Garudino shrimp and some tiny microfish as well. Let's get started. So the tank that we're going to use for this project is a 30 cm cube. Holds roughly 28 liters or 7 US gallons. As always, I'm going to prep the tank by adding a background and a foam mat. The light that I'm using is from Twinstar. It's an RGB light, so hopefully it will make the colors of the shrimp stand out even more. It has a dimming function as well as a timer for 6, 8 or 10 hours per day. Now let's build the substrate layer. First up I'm using APT Start. This contains beneficial bacteria and nutrients for the plants, and using this will speed up the cycling process so we can add the shrimp faster. The next layer is AQUASOIL. This will provide the majority of the nutrients for the first couple of months, so we don't have to worry about liquid fertilizers just yet. Now we can start making a simple hardscape. I found these really cool round boulders in my local fish store, which will be perfect for this layout. I have a few large ones as well as a couple smaller ones. Because the boulders are round, we do get these large gaps in between them. I'm going to close the gaps with some filter floss, so when we add in the sand, we don't have to worry about the sand and the soil mixing. I'm also going to glue the big boulders together to make sure they don't start shifting later on. As always, I'm using my cotton pad and liquid super glue method. That's the foreground pretty much done. I'm now going to add more AQUASOIL in the background and a few more boulders. Here we go, hardscape all done. I think it looks pretty cool already. We have a nice slope towards the back, which definitely added some depth to the layout. Now let's talk about the plants and the floating moss balls. This whole idea came to me because Dental Plants has these floating moss balls in their assortment, and I wanted to try them out. So it's basically a sphere wrapped with moss and covered with a net, and then with some fishing line it's attached to a ceramic ring. Now unfortunately they're only available in one size, but I think it would be cool to have a few different sizes, so I'm going to try and make some myself. So I ordered some styrofoam, some fishing line and different types of moss and started wrapping. Now wrapping was a bit tedious but pretty straightforward. The next step however is a bit more challenging. I have to figure out how to weigh down the styrofoam enough and prevent it from floating to the surface. I'm not exactly sure what's inside the pre-made moss balls, but the ceramic ring is not very heavy, yet it's enough to hold them down. The styrofoam is very light, so even when I attach something heavy, it would just float up to the surface. So I have to come up with a different solution. So I've basically glued the end of the fishing line to a small rock, and I'm going to bury the rock into the substrate. Unfortunately, this means that I won't be able to remove the moss balls after I'm done planting the rest of the plants, but that's okay. Here's Here's how the tank was looking with all the floating moss balls in place. I think it looks pretty cool already. I'm now going to fill in the rest of the empty substrate with dwarf hairgrass. In my opinion, this is the perfect plant for a shrimp tank because it provides loads of hiding places for the tiny shrimp babies. Okay, planting is done, so we can now move the tank back to the shelf and fill it up again. I'm also going to add a small external canister filter to this setup. Two weeks have passed and today is an exciting day because we are going to add in the shrimp. The hairgrass and the moss is looking good. There's just one moss ball that has turned brown, but hopefully that will sort itself out. So I'm going to start with 4 different colors of shrimp. We have orange, blue, white and red. So these are all Neocaridina shrimp. And they're basically all the same type, but they've been carefully bred and selected to have different colors. Now because I've mixed them all together, there is a chance that the babies will not have the same color as their parents. I'm not an expert on the whole genetics thing, but it is likely that the babies will return to the original wild brown color. We'll just have to see what happens. Okay guys, here it is, the floating moss balls Nano Aquascape. Now 8 weeks old, yeah, 56 days. I've actually just finished with a little maintenance session, so right now it's looking really fresh. Absolutely loving it. And I've also just added fish. Initially I was thinking to keep this a shrimp only tank, but I was expecting the shrimp to be a little bit more on the moss balls, a little bit more in the upper region as well, but they're actually staying mostly on the sand and kind of in between the hairgrass. So the top part of the tank was almost completely empty. So I decided to add some dwarf rasboras. It's a mix of chili rasboras, phoenix rasboras and exclamation point rasboras. And especially the chili rasboras, the color on them is insane. Most of that is because of the light. I also have some chili rasboras in the no filter vase, but the color on them is very different. It's just not as intense red. But yeah, now that the fish are in here, like there's definitely a lot going on. Absolutely loving it. Now, if you're thinking of trying something like this yourself as well, the floating moss balls, a few things to keep in mind. Overall, it's actually a very simple setup, you know, like it's not very difficult to make. The only thing that's a little bit tricky is trimming the moss, because of course, you know, the moss is growing and you want to make sure they kind of stay nice and the spheres stay nice and round. So once in a while, you do have to trim the moss. The only issue with moss is that when you trim it, it sinks down to the bottom. It doesn't float up to the surface like most plants. So basically what I did when I was trimming the moss, I was also at the same time siphoning out the water. So I would siphon out the moss as I was trimming it. I have a little clip of it which I will overlay. But that was definitely a very tedious job. So I would try to figure out a way to make sure that the moss balls are removable from the tank. So I buried a little rock into the substrate. I think you can actually just leave the rock on top of the substrate. You can take the moss balls out, trim them in the sink or whatever, and then put them back in, you know? I think that's just a lot easier. Well, I actually haven't trimmed the hairgrass just yet. Of course, that's a little bit tricky as well because you have to be careful that you don't cut the fishing line. I've also just noticed the first shrimp baby sitting on top of this tiny little moss ball all the way in the back. I think it's a red cherry baby because it has a little bit of a pinkish tone, but yeah, we'll see the full color when they are a little bit bigger. Besides that, I haven't really seen any babies yet, but we do have quite a lot of berried shrimp, so shrimp with eggs. There's a white one that's full of eggs, an orange one. I haven't seen a blue one with eggs yet, but yeah, be curious to see how it's going to develop. One thing I forgot to mention about the moss balls is that I've actually used different types of moss. So the pre-made moss balls from Dental Plants, they are wrapped with Java moss. Then the middle-sized ones, so the 3 that are just behind that, are wrapped with spiky moss and weeping moss. And then the two small ones all the way in the back are wrapped with, I think it's called Pelea moss. And the Pelea actually grows very slowly. I haven't trimmed that one yet, so maybe if you're looking for a low maintenance moss ball setup, I would go with the Pelea. A few more things to note about the tank. I'm currently running the lights on 80% intensity for 6 hours. I was also using some floating plants to kind of help diffuse the light even more and also help soak up some excess nutrients. But I've now removed the floating plants because they kind of take away from the theme, you know, the floating moss balls. Then in terms of maintenance, I'm just doing a 50% water change once per week. So I'll remove 50%, clean the glass a little bit, and then just fill it back up. I did start the tank with reverse osmosis water. I'm running all my tanks here in the studio with reverse osmosis water, but I kind of felt like the new Caribbean shrimp do prefer more hard water, so this tank is now running on tap water. I also feed the shrimp almost every day. You know, we have quite a lot of shrimp in here. I think there's about 40 or 50. So I'm using the AQUASOIL Organics shrimp granules. I'm not feeding a whole lot, maybe 3 or 4 of those granules every single day. But yeah, just once per day. And then I haven't started dosing liquid fertilizer just yet, but the tank is now 8 weeks old, so I'll probably start soon. And as always, I'm going to use APT3. This is a complete liquid fertilizer that I use in all my tanks, and I have a link and a discount code in the video description. But yeah guys, I think that's it for this floating moss ball aquascape. It was a really fun project, something a little bit different as well. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it, and if you did enjoy it, then don't forget to smash the like button. Guys, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.